When the lawyer opened the envelope, my son leaned back with a proud smile. He thought he had it all. But when my name was mentioned, that smile disappeared. His face went pale, and the whole room froze. "You won't believe what happened next." The lawyer's voice trembled as he read the next line of my late husband's will. The whole room went silent. My son Daniel, who had been smirking since we arrived, suddenly sat up straight. His face turned pale, almost ghostly. "And to my beloved wife Margaret, I leave the sum of $72 million, along with full ownership of the estate." The words hung in the air like thunder. Daniel's jaw dropped. He looked at the lawyer, then at me, his lips shaking. Just yesterday he had laughed in my face and said, "Mom, don't expect a dime from Dad. Everything belongs to me now." But now, the smirk was gone. The room filled with whispers, and Daniel's wife grabbed his arm, whispering, "Did he just say 72 million?" Daniel's eyes met mine, wide, shocked, and full of disbelief. I sat there, calm and still, though inside my heart raced. I wanted to cry, not because of the money, but because of how far my son had fallen. Just as the lawyer reached for the next paper, Daniel slammed his hand on the table. "That can't be right," he shouted. "Dad would never leave her all that money." The lawyer blinked, uncomfortable. Everyone in the room turned to look at me. I slowly turned to Daniel and said softly, "Your father made sure the truth would be known after he was gone." And then, the lawyer unfolded a letter, a handwritten one from my husband. "This," he said, "was meant to be read right after the will." Daniel froze. But before the lawyer could read a single word, Daniel lunged for the letter, shouting, "Don't read that." The room erupted in chaos. And that's when it all started. I remember when it all began. It was a rainy afternoon, about 6 months before my husband passed. I was in the garden, tending to the roses I planted 30 years ago when we first moved into that house. My husband, Richard, had been battling illness for years. His heart was weak, and the doctors said he wouldn't have much time left. But even then, he never lost his smile. "Maggie," he would say, "if I leave before you, make sure the roses still bloom." Daniel, our only child, had changed over the years. When he was younger, he was kind, full of dreams. He'd bring me little wildflowers from the backyard and say, "Mom, one day I'll build you a castle." But when he grew up, something in him hardened. After marrying a woman named Julia, beautiful, but proud, Daniel stopped visiting as often. He only came around when he needed money. One evening he visited unexpectedly. He walked into the house without knocking, looked around and sighed. "Mom, you and Dad should sell this old place," he said. "The market's good. You could move into a smaller house. I could handle the sale for you." I smiled gently. "This is our home, Daniel. Your father and I built our life here." He rolled his eyes. "Mom, you don't get it. Dad's sick. You'll need help soon. Why not make things easier for everyone?" By everyone, I knew he meant himself. Later that night, I told Richard what Daniel said. He just sighed and looked away. "Our son's lost his way," he whispered. "But maybe life will teach him what we couldn't." Over the next few months, Daniel's visits grew colder. When Richard finally passed, Daniel didn't shed a tear at the funeral. He stood tall, greeting guests like a businessman, not a grieving son. A week after the burial, he called me into the living room. He had already met with the family lawyer. "Mom," he began, pretending to be gentle, "Dad didn't leave a will. And even if he did, everything was under his name. That means it all automatically goes to me." I looked at him in silence. He smiled and said, "Don't worry, I'll take care of you. But you can't expect a dime from Dad's business account. I've already arranged the paperwork." Those words hit me like a knife. My own son, my only child, was trying to erase me from my husband's life's work. I didn't argue. I simply nodded and said, "All right, Daniel. If that's what you believe, then may God guide you." But deep down I knew Richard had done something. Before he passed, he made several secret visits to the lawyer, Mr. Graham. I didn't ask questions then. I trusted my husband. Weeks passed. I lived quietly, visiting Richard's grave every morning. Daniel didn't come around anymore, except once, to collect more papers he said were important. He didn't even ask how I was coping. Then one morning, a letter arrived from Mr. Graham. Mrs. Margaret, it read. Please come to the firm on Monday at 10 a.m. for the reading of Mr. Richard's will. You may bring your son as well. I didn't know what to expect. I told Daniel about it and he laughed. A will? You mean a piece of paper that says I get everything? Fine, Mom, I'll come. Just don't be disappointed when you realize Dad didn't leave you a dime. He said it again. Don't expect a dime from Dad. That sentence echoed in my heart for days. I prayed every night, not for money, but for my son's soul. When the day came, I dressed simply in black and wore Richard's wedding band around my neck. Daniel arrived in a fancy suit with his wife, grinning from ear to ear. Mom, he whispered as we sat. After this, maybe you can finally relax. I'll take care of everything. But when the lawyer began to read the will, that grin melted off his face faster than I could blink. The first few lines were formal, about debts, business accounts, and charity donations. Then came the part that froze the air in the room. The lawyer adjusted his glasses and said, To my beloved wife Margaret, who stood by me through every storm, I leave $72 million and the entirety of our estate. The silence was deafening. Daniel's face turned the color of chalk. His wife's hand slipped from his arm. And as I looked at my son's trembling hands, I realized something. This wasn't victory. This was heartbreak. Because what I wanted most wasn't money. It was the love of the boy I once raised. The one who used to bring me flowers and say, Mom, I'll build you a castle. But before I could even breathe, Daniel slammed his fist down and shouted, That will is fake. The lawyer froze. And then he reached for that sealed letter, the one my husband had left behind. Mr. Richard asked that I read this immediately after the will, he said. Daniel's voice shook. Don't read that. But it was too late. The room went quiet. You could hear a pin drop. The lawyer's hand trembled as he held the envelope. My heart pounded so loudly I thought everyone could hear it. Daniel was breathing fast, his eyes darting between the lawyer and me. His wife, Julia, leaned closer and whispered, Daniel, sit down. You're making a scene. But Daniel didn't listen. Don't open that, he shouted again, his voice cracking. The lawyer cleared his throat. Mr. Richard specifically instructed me to read this aloud, no matter what. He slowly tore the seal. The paper inside was slightly yellow, the handwriting neat and familiar. I recognized Richard's strong, careful strokes. My hands started shaking. The lawyer began reading. To my dear wife Margaret, and to my son Daniel. If you are hearing this, it means I am gone. Margaret, you stood by me when I had nothing. You cared for me when my body failed, and you never once complained. You gave me a lifetime of peace. Daniel. You are my only child, my blood. But in these last years, I have seen the choices you made. And they broke my heart. I gave you everything. But you turned your back on the values your mother, and I tried to teach you. I saw the greed in your eyes when you came to visit, not love. This is why I made my final decision. My wife deserves everything, not because she asked, but because she earned it through love and loyalty. Daniel, my wish for you is not wealth but wisdom. May this loss teach you what money never could. The lawyer's voice softened. That's the end. The words hung in the air like a storm that refused to pass. Daniel's face twisted in anger. This is ridiculous, he shouted. Dad would never say that. You forged it. Mr. Graham shook his head calmly. The handwriting has already been verified by experts. The recording of your father's voice confirming the same is stored in our files. The mention of recording made Daniel's face drain of all color. There's a recording? I whispered. Yes, Mrs. Margaret. Your husband left an audio message. Would you like me to play it? Before I could answer, Daniel jumped up, knocking his chair over. You can't play that. It's private. But Julia, his wife, looked furious. Private? Daniel, what did you do? He didn't answer. He just clenched his fists and glared at me like I was the enemy. The lawyer pressed a button on the old recorder sitting beside him. My husband's voice filled the room, weak, but calm and warm, like I remembered. If you're hearing this, then my time has come. Daniel, my son. I know you've been handling my accounts. I also know about the missing funds you tried to move into your personal name. I didn't stop you because I wanted to see if your heart would change. But it didn't. The lawyer paused the tape and looked at Daniel. Do you wish for me to continue? Daniel's mouth opened, but no words came out. His hands were trembling. I nodded. Please continue. Margaret, my love, I leave everything to you because I trust you will do what's right. You know our son better than anyone. Perhaps someday, you'll find it in your heart to forgive him. The recording clicked off. I sat there frozen, tears running down my cheeks. Everyone in the room stared at Daniel. His wife covered her mouth in shock. You stole from your father, she whispered. Daniel buried his face in his hands. I didn't mean to. I thought. His voice cracked. I thought I deserved it. For a long moment, no one spoke. The truth hung between us like heavy smoke. The lawyer gathered the papers quietly. Mrs. Margaret, he said gently, you'll need to sign some documents later. But for now, I think it's best you rest. I nodded, still numb. As I stood up, Daniel looked at me, not with anger this time, but shame. Mom, he muttered. I didn't know Dad knew. I wanted to speak, but words failed me. I simply turned and walked out. Outside, the wind was cold. I stood by my car, holding the wedding ring around my neck. I whispered, Richard, you were right. Life has to teach him. I was about to get in the car when I heard footsteps behind me. Daniel had followed me out. Mom, please, he said, voice trembling. You can share some of it with me, right? I'm your son. I made mistakes, but I'm still your son. I turned slowly. His eyes were red. Daniel, I said softly. You didn't care when I had nothing. Why do you care now that I have something? He opened his mouth to reply, but before he could say another word, Julia stormed out of the building, holding her phone. Daniel, she yelled. Is it true? Did you transfer money from your father's account before he died? Daniel froze. Julia, I just spoke to the lawyer's assistant, she interrupted, waving a document in his face. They have proof, Daniel. Proof that you did it. People passing by started staring. Daniel's face went red. Not here, he muttered. Julia, stop. But she didn't stop. You lied to me. You told me the money was legally yours. You made me part of this. Her voice broke. She turned to me with tears in her eyes. Mrs. Margaret, I'm so sorry. I didn't know. I thought he was just helping with the estate. Then she ran off crying. Daniel just stood there, frozen, his world falling apart piece by piece. Mom, he whispered, please help me fix this. I looked at him sadly. Some things, my son, only truth can fix. I got into my car, started the engine, and drove off slowly. My hands were shaking, but I kept my eyes on the road. At that moment, I thought it was over. The will, the lies, the heartbreak. But I was wrong. Because later that night, someone knocked on my door. And when I opened it, I froze in shock. The knock came again, 3 slow, heavy thuds that echoed through the quiet house. It was almost midnight. The rain had started again, tapping softly against the windows. I hesitated for a moment, clutching my robe tightly around me. My heart thumped faster. Who could it be at this hour? I walked slowly to the door, my old slippers dragging on the floor. For a moment, I thought it might be Daniel, but something in my gut told me this wasn't just another visit. When I opened the door, I gasped. There he was, Daniel, standing in the rain, soaked from head to toe. His eyes were swollen from crying. His once proud shoulders sagged. He looked nothing like the arrogant young man who had shouted in the lawyer's office that morning. Daniel. I whispered. What are you doing here? He stepped closer, shivering. Mom, please. Can I come in? I hesitated, then slowly opened the door wider. He stepped inside, dripping water all over the rug. Sit down, I said gently, pointing to the chair by the fireplace. He sat, burying his face in his hands. For a while, the only sound was the crackling of the fire and the soft rumble of thunder outside. Finally, I spoke. Daniel, what are you doing here so late? He didn't answer right away. When he finally looked up, his eyes were red and hollow. Julia left me, he said in a broken voice. She took her things and said she couldn't live with a thief. I felt a sting in my chest. Daniel. He shook his head. I ruined everything, Mom. I was so sure Dad would give me everything. I thought I deserved it after working at his company all those years. I looked at him quietly. You didn't work for him, Daniel. You worked against him. You wanted control, not care. He looked down, tears dripping from his chin. I know, he whispered. I was greedy. I wanted people to see me as the successful son. I thought if I had the money, people would respect me. I sighed deeply, walking closer. Son, respect isn't bought with money. It's earned with character. That's what your father tried to teach you. Daniel rubbed his temples. I can't undo what I did. The lawyer said the police might get involved because of those missing funds. That made me freeze. Police? He nodded weakly. Dad's company accountant filed a report before he died. The investigation just reopened. For a moment, I didn't know what to say. My son, my only child, was about to lose everything. Mom, please, he said suddenly, grabbing my hand. You have the inheritance now. You could pay it back. If you do, maybe they'll close the case. I stared at him, my heart aching. Daniel, are you asking me to give away what your father left me to fix what you stole? He dropped his gaze. I'm asking you to save me, he whispered. Tears welled in my eyes. I turned toward the window, watching the rain slide down the glass. Richard's words echoed in my mind. May this loss teach him what money never could. I finally said softly, You don't need me to save you, Daniel. You need to save yourself. He stood up angrily. So you're just going to watch your own son go to jail? I turned to him sharply. I watched your father die, Daniel. Do you think this is easy for me? He froze. I rarely raised my voice, but this time I couldn't hold it back. All your father wanted was for you to learn humility. You thought you could take shortcuts, use lies to win. But life doesn't work that way. I said, my voice trembling. You're my son and I love you, but love doesn't mean I must reward your wrongs. Daniel looked at me for a long moment. His face softened. He whispered, I don't deserve you, Mom. I sat beside him and placed a hand on his shoulder. You can still make it right, Daniel. Go to the lawyer. Tell him everything. Face the truth before it faces you. He nodded slowly, his tears falling again. Will you come with me? I hesitated, then said, Yes. I'll be there. But you must promise one thing. You'll tell the whole truth. I promise, he whispered. That night, I let him sleep in the guest room. For the first time in years, I tucked him in like when he was a child. As I stood by the doorway, I remembered his little voice from long ago. Mom, I'll build you a castle. I smiled sadly. Maybe this was his chance to rebuild something better than a castle, his character. The next morning, the air felt heavy. The rain had stopped, but the clouds still hung low. Daniel looked tired but calm. He said he was ready. We arrived at the lawyer's office together. Mr. Graham greeted us kindly. Mrs. Margaret, Daniel. I'm glad you came. Daniel sat down. I want to confess, he said softly, about the missing funds. The lawyer nodded, pulling out a file. We've been expecting you. It's good you came on your own. That shows honesty. Daniel swallowed hard. I didn't mean to steal, Mr. Graham. I just wanted control over the business. I thought Dad was too old to handle it. Mr. Graham listened quietly. Your father forgave you long before this, Daniel. But now it's time to make things right. Daniel nodded. I'll pay everything back. I'll sell my house, my car, whatever it takes. I looked at him, proud but sad. My son was finally facing his mistakes. Just as Mr. Graham was about to respond, his phone rang. He answered and his face suddenly changed. Yes, he said into the phone, she's here too. He glanced at me, then at Daniel. Who was that? I asked. Mr. Graham put the phone down slowly. That was the company's financial investigator. They've just uncovered new information, something your husband didn't mention in the will. Daniel and I exchanged a look. What kind of information? I asked carefully. Mr. Graham sighed. It appears Mr. Richard had a secret account, one that wasn't listed in the will. And Mrs. Margaret, your name is on it. My heart skipped. My name? Yes, he said. It holds another large sum of money, but that's not the strange part. There's also a message attached to it. It says, only to be revealed if Daniel comes clean. Daniel and I froze. The lawyer looked at us both. And now that he has, I think it's time we open it. He pulled out another sealed envelope, my husband's handwriting again neat and strong. As he carefully began to tear it open, my hands shook uncontrollably. Whatever was inside that envelope was about to change everything. The lawyer unfolded the envelope with steady hands, but my heart raced as if it already knew that what lay inside would shake our lives again. Daniel leaned forward, his face pale and tense. I could see fear in his eyes, the same fear a little boy has when he knows he's about to be punished, yet hopes he'll still be forgiven. Mr. Graham cleared his throat and began to read. If this letter is being read, it means my son has finally spoken the truth. Daniel, if you are listening, I want you to know that my love for you was never tied to money. I left this hidden account not as a reward, but as a final lesson. Inside it lies a sum of $5 million. It is not to be touched unless you fulfill one condition. The lawyer paused, glancing at us. Daniel's eyebrows furrowed. Condition? What condition? Mr. Graham continued. The condition is simple, but it requires courage. Daniel must publicly admit his wrongs to the company board and to his mother, taking full responsibility for the funds he mishandled. Only then can this account be legally transferred to him. If he refuses, everything in that account automatically goes to the children's charity Margaret has always supported. Silence. The ticking clock on the wall was the only sound in the room. Daniel sat frozen, his lips parted slightly. He stared at the letter as if it were a ghost from the past. I have to confess publicly, he said in disbelief. Yes, the lawyer replied softly. That was your father's wish. Daniel leaned back in his chair, his hands covering his face. He really knew how to test me, he whispered. I looked at him gently. Your father didn't want to punish you, Daniel. He wanted to heal you. This is his way of helping you make peace with yourself. He looked at me, his eyes red. And what if I can't face them, Mom? What if I can't stand in front of everyone and admit what I did? I reached out and held his hand. Then you'll never be free, my son. The truth may hurt, but it heals faster than lies ever could. He sat silently for a long time. Then, without warning, he stood up. Call the board, Mr. Graham, he said firmly. I'll do it. The lawyer nodded and began making calls. Later that afternoon, we stood in the large conference room at the company Richard had built from nothing. The same men and women who once admired Daniel now looked at him with mixed emotions. Pity, confusion, judgment. Daniel cleared his throat, his voice trembling. Before we begin, I owe everyone in this room an apology, he said. I took money that wasn't mine. I lied to protect myself. My father found out before he passed, and I disappointed him in ways I can't ever undo. The room stayed silent. You could hear the hum of the air conditioner. He continued, his voice cracking. But I want to change. I want to rebuild what I destroyed, not with money, but with honesty. When he finished, he turned to look at me. His eyes were filled with tears. I nodded slowly, proud of him in a way words couldn't describe. After the meeting, the lawyer shook Daniel's hand. Your father would be proud, he said. You've fulfilled his condition. Daniel took a deep breath, relief washing over his face. So, the account? Mr. Graham smiled. It's now legally yours. But remember, your father's lesson doesn't end with a signature. Daniel nodded quietly. As we left the building, the sun began to peek through the clouds. It had been weeks since I'd seen such light. Daniel walked beside me silently. For the first time in years, he didn't look ahead with pride or behind with regret. He looked beside him at me. Mom, he said softly. Thank you for not giving up on me. I smiled faintly. A mother never truly gives up. She just waits for her child to find his way home. He smiled, a real, gentle smile I hadn't seen since he was a boy. But just when I thought things were finally settling, life decided to test us one last time. That evening, I received a phone call from an unknown number. Mrs. Margaret? A man's voice said. I'm calling from your late husband's company. We found something strange in the records Mr. Richard left behind. Something that might change everything you thought you knew about him. My heart skipped. What do you mean? The voice hesitated. There's a name on one of his private business accounts, a woman's name. And she shares the same last name as your husband. The phone nearly slipped from my hand. Who? I whispered. He replied. A woman named Eleanor Richards. My blood ran cold. I ended the call, my hands trembling. I sat there in silence, staring at the fireplace. Daniel came into the room, noticing my pale face. Mom, what's wrong? I looked up slowly. Your father might not have told us everything. Daniel frowned. What do you mean? I handed him the phone. There's another account, and another Richards. He stared at me, speechless. The peace we had finally found began to crumble again. And deep down I knew. The truth about my husband was only beginning to unfold. The next morning, the house felt heavier than ever. I barely slept. The name Eleanor Richards kept echoing in my mind. Who was she? Why was her name linked to my husband's secret account? Daniel sat across from me at the breakfast table, his coffee untouched. Mom, he said quietly, maybe it's a mistake. Maybe she's just a relative or a business partner. I wanted to believe that, but something in my heart told me otherwise. Richard had never hidden anything from me before. He was a man of his word. If he'd kept this secret, there had to be a reason. We drove to the company once more, where Mr. Graham greeted us. I received your call, he said. We checked the archives. The name Eleanor Richards appears on one of Mr. Richards' oldest private accounts, opened over 25 years ago. My heart sank. 25 years ago? Yes, the lawyer said gently. Before Daniel turned 10. I sat down slowly, my hands trembling. Daniel looked between us, confused. What are you saying, Mr. Graham? Mr. Graham hesitated. We don't want to jump to conclusions, but, Mrs. Margaret, your husband might have been supporting someone else financially, possibly family. Family? I whispered, my voice barely audible. Mr. Graham nodded and slid a folder across the table. Inside was an old photograph, slightly faded but clear enough to see. A young woman stood beside Richard, smiling. She couldn't have been older than 20, and in her arms was a little girl, maybe 6 or 7, with Richard's same blue eyes. Daniel's face went pale. That's Dad. And the girl? The lawyer said softly, her name was Eleanor. And the little girl, we believe her name is Grace. I felt my breath catch. So my husband had another child? Mr. Graham nodded quietly. It appears so. The room spun. My heart broke, not from anger, but from disbelief. Richard, the man I had trusted for 40 years, had hidden something so deep, even after death. Daniel clenched his fists. So there's another heir? Yes, said Mr. Graham. By law, if DNA proves the connection, Grace is entitled to a share of the inheritance. We've already located her. She's an adult now, about 30 years old. She's agreed to meet you. I stared at him. Meet me? Yes. She said she wants no money, only to understand her father. I felt tears sting my eyes. I wasn't sure if I was ready. Later that afternoon, at the lawyer's office again, a young woman walked in. Grace. She looked so much like Richard that my heart stopped. Her eyes, her smile, even the way she carried herself. It was as if he had been reborn in her. Mrs. Margaret, she said softly. It's an honor to finally meet you. I stood slowly, my voice trembling. You look just like him. She smiled sadly. Mom always said I did. I couldn't speak. Daniel stood behind me, his face unreadable. Grace continued gently. I'm not here to claim anything. I just wanted to say thank you. Because even if he couldn't be in my life, he made sure we never suffered. He sent money for my education. And when Mom passed, I found letters from him. Letters full of guilt and love for you and Daniel. Tears filled my eyes. He still loved us, I whispered. Yes, Grace said softly. He did. He just made a mistake, one he never forgave himself for. I stepped closer and took her hand. You're part of this family, Grace. You always were, even if I didn't know. Daniel's voice broke. Dad hid all this from us, and yet, he still tried to fix it in his own way. Grace nodded. He wanted peace, not chaos. For the first time, I felt something warm in my heart again, forgiveness. Maybe life wasn't about perfect families or flawless love. Maybe it was about grace, The kind that lets us start over, even after pain. As we all stood there, me, Daniel, and Grace, I realized Richard had left me one final lesson. Money fades, secrets hurt, but love, even broken, can still heal. Outside, the sun broke through the clouds completely. The light fell across the three of us, soft and golden. Daniel smiled faintly at his newfound sister. "Welcome to the family," he said. Grace laughed through her tears. "Thank you, brother." I looked up at the sky and whispered, "You did it, Richard. You brought us back together." And for the first time in a long time, my heart felt whole again. At that moment, I realized, money fades, but love and respect are worth more than gold. Tell me, what lesson did you learn from this story? Speech balloon comment below, and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more stories that touch the heart.